Here we are, in the meatpacking district. I thought it to be a suitable frame for a discussion about reputation, food production. This is a special situation for me. I mean, you can see me, I can't see you. So I took a chance this morning. I wore my old fur coat. I mean, it's freezing cold here. Politically incorrect as it is, I love it. One of the most severe consequences of the corona crisis in Denmark has been the elimination, the total shutdown of an entire branch. Every mink in Denmark has been killed due to corona. Now, one would think that once you eliminate a lot of people's livelihood that way, it would raise empathy and sympathy. But it didn't. It raised a very harsh debate that we've seen before. It is a debate that surfaces every time it has to do with production that involves live animals, for the sake of food even. It's a debate that touches on health, on climate, on sustainability, on animal welfare. But it's also a debate that touches on emotions, on feelings, on perceptions, sometimes on something that is similar to religion. Just 5 decades ago, in this specific spot, you would see farmers come dragging with their cattle behind them, just a few pieces, to have them slaughtered here. Back then, nobody was debating whether it was optional to eat meat or even a good idea. We would just consider ourselves lucky if we could afford meat every day. Today, this is a very hip area where the inhabitants are mainly vegans. It holds, I think, its own sort of ironic sense of humor that you go to the meatpacking district to eat broccoli. Looking at it that way, communication in the farming society has never been more important. It has also never been more difficult. And yet, the communication that comes out of the established farming organizations, well, it doesn't seem to meet the need, to be honest. It's not quite up to par, I'm sorry. And this is not specific for Welsh farmers or for Danish farmers or for American farmers or even Ecuadorian farmers. I've been around the block now for 25 years working in food communication, and it's the same thing all over the world. In a place where we're trapped between being picked on and proud, we seem to have invented a new language. We don't kill the animals, we don't even slaughter them, we harvest them now. We don't talk about slaughterhouses, no, we work with abattoirs. And I know it comes out of the French, abat, which means to slaughter, but we kind of hide it a little bit, don't we? If we didn't know better, one would think we weren't really proud of what we're doing, or we were trying to hide something. So why is it that communication thing is so difficult? I mean, one would think it's just about having a clear message, sending it out in a timely manner. Not quite. Now, I'd like to take you away from the farming scene for just a few minutes to get a broader perspective, to maybe get a better view of things. This is how I see it. We all prefer to spend the most time possible with people that are exactly like ourselves. And I know that there'll be people saying, well, that's not me. I like to know really, really different kinds of people. Really? I'm thinking if you look at your surroundings, I mean, this goes for our private lives, our social media. I mean, look at our Facebook threads and our Instagram stories. They basically all come out of people we agree with. This is why we wake up one morning and we're deadly surprised that there is a Donald Trump in the White House, or a little surprised about the Brexit, I mean, if you ask me, because I knew nobody who would vote for that. Nobody. So that way we tend to be confirmed all the time that what we're thinking, what we're believing in is right. Which also means that if we eat meat, we only know people who eat meat. I mean, honestly, I don't have that many guests coming over for vegan evening. Now, I brought along a little can of sausages. You'll see it's slightly dented and old. And this specific can of sausages, I know this is not a brand you would know in Wales. I'm sorry, I would have so liked to go to Wales for this. but you have something similar. It's probably from Tulip. It's called the skinless cocktail sausages. Exactly the same product, produced by exactly the same company. This specific can I've traveled with for more than a decade. It expired in May 13. So by now I'm a little afraid to have it in a suitcase when I travel because I don't quite know how it's going to react to that whole flight situation. But I brought it along because for me this holds the story of what happens when we only know our own truth to be the truth, when we're not meeting people who has different opinions, and also when we tend to just push away people with different opinions. It's a very difficult situation. It has to do with the whole communication scene, specifically in the farming society. This is a product that, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it is not my product. There's nothing wrong with it. You can just, read on the backside exactly what's in it. Which also means as a consumer, I can see that and I can say, well, I'm going to have something different. I'm a food snob and I stand by it. I have no problem being that. So if I had, let's say, 30 friends over for dinner. Now, I live in this hip area, so my apartment is way too small to have 30 people fit in there. But if I had 30 people over for dinner, I can be pretty sure that none of those would have ever eaten this product. So what happens when we start debating on an evening like that whether this product even has a right to exist? I mean, nobody eats it, right? We could easily shut that production down, couldn't we? Now, it often turns out that nobody is a very large group of people. Because in Denmark alone, and I'll just remind you, Denmark is a very small country. In Denmark alone, 172 tons of this product is sold every year. So somebody is having a lot of this because I'm not having it at all. This, for me, tells a story of that one thing that brings us all together in this world. Food. We all have to eat. It's the one common denominator we all have as human beings. It also tells a story of how food has become a symbol of polarization in the world, a debate where we no longer reach each other. Well, we get a confirmation that we are right. So what happens when you meet people who has decided already before meeting you that you are wrong? Now, being a former journalist myself, I know journalism inside out. I have covered food politics for the largest national newspaper in Denmark for years. I know this debate. And over my career, I've had the pleasure of working with reporters globally. And sometimes you just know where they're coming from, depending on which media they're approaching you from. Let's have an example. Now, dealing with the press is not necessarily the same as dealing with consumers. Remember how we touched on the fact that most of us prefers to spend time with people who are just like ourselves. Well, talking about the press, it's simply not their job to agree with you. Now, most people who feel strongly about what they do tend to react quite sharply to criticism, especially if that criticism just seems to go on and to be often based on, well, if not a lie, then a different truth. And if there's one thing you can say in general about farmers worldwide, it is that they feel very strongly about what they do. You simply do not become a farmer if you're not 100% into it. It's too hard a job to be something you do for fun or while figuring out what else to do. That gives a strong sense of self, a very defined self-perception. A little like you might meet in journalists. Well, just saying. But what if there was a different way to go about it? What if you could actually communicate in a way that would invite people in? Just like British farmers did just about 12 years ago when they were in a huge crisis and they went into the recording studio and recorded Stand By Your Ham. It was everywhere in the media and it was loved. Everyone from Jamie Oliver to the entire population was behind them and wanted to buy British products. And I promise you, it wasn't popular due to vocal quality. Now, I'd like to tell you a little story. It's just an example. As Senior Vice President of Global Communication at Danish Crown, one of the largest pork producers in the world, of course I dealt with a lot of journalists over time. And now this day, a young journalist calls me from a national newspaper. I, of course, don't know she's young. I mean, I've never seen her. But after the conversation, I decided that maybe an internship on her part is the only explanation for the way she approached the topic. She calls me up and she says, "Do you think it's ethically all right that you kill the animals?" Now there I am in this slaughter company. One would think that I had decided on this before I accepted the job way back. At first I think what she means is the way we go about it, and I'm always ready. Transparency is the key word. Come and see how we do it. Let's have the debate from there. But no, she actually means the fact that once the animals go into the slaughterhouse, they come out dead. So I do what I do best. I attach it with a little sense of humor, and I say to her, "I believe it's a very interesting question you're asking, and there might be solutions to this, but I haven't really thought it through. So off the top of my head, I'm thinking there could be two ways to go. One, we would have to eat the animals alive." Now, she becomes a little quiet here. It wasn't what she anticipated. And I go on. I'm on a roll now, and I go, "I don't know about you, but my kitchen is not really built for this. I have this really white wooden floor. And also, I mean, the average slaughtering weight of a pig at that time is, as you probably know, it's 84.2 kilograms. And well, I'm a foodie, but even for a foodie, it's a lot of food in one go. So if it's not entirely dead once you've had whatever you can eat, does it then have to go in the fridge? And can it go in with the vegetables, or do I have to have a separate fridge for this? And if I put it in with the vegetables, what if something in there gets salmonella? How do I determine where it comes from? And what if it hasn't stopped going oink oink once I can't eat anymore, and it keeps me up at night? You see, there's a lot of questions still unanswered here. There's, of course, a different solution, I say to her. At this point, she hasn't said anything for quite some time. I say, the other solution would be for you and me to turn the entire world into fruitarians. And I don't know if you've heard about fruitarians. It's a step further out from vegans. Fruitarians, they make their own shoes out of paper and only eat fruit that has already let go of the tree. It has started to rot. And I know, usually we say life is short. I'm just saying life can also get too long. This is how the conversation ends. I tell her that I have never met a fruitarian with a sound sense of humor. And it might be the lack of protein in their diet. I mean, it's scientifically proven that it's specifically the protein that comes from meat that develops our brains. Now, can this approach be used every time you have a critical question? Of course not. But a little irony and a little sense of humor might get you a long way. One of the things I have seen as a common thing with all farmers is once you get affected by the criticism, you tend to become a victim. And learning that you might not be one to ease up a little bit might just be a way to go. Now, just the other day, I was reading a blog written by a Welsh farmer. Actually, I believe it's the wife of a Welsh farmer. She was writing about how she'd given up the debate with the vegans by simply blocking them. They're not really into the dialogue. It's often a yelling match. And I get her, I understand her, and I also tend to agree with her on the problem. The thing is, at the end of the day, the way you portray it in media is about likability and nothing more. So being angry publicly, it comes with a cost. Exactly 30 years ago, the last cow was transported in from rural areas to be slaughtered right here. Today, you'll find meatpacking districts all over the world, and today they're very hip neighborhoods, expensive to live in and expensive to eat in. Now, one might say on the surface that the presence of these old buildings, these old listed buildings actually, ties together city and countryside. I'll go out on a limb and say country and city people have never been further apart. One might ask, why does that even matter? I mean, isn't it nice that we're very different people living in the same country? And I'm all for it. It's just that in this case, we're part of the same supply chain. We're dependent on each other. So we need the debate, we need the transparency, we need to know where we're standing. So, we're actually still in the meatpacking district. But now we're in my place. I took us out of the weather for a second. So bear with me. And I believe it's time for a cup of tea. Now, right here behind me, we've had slaughterings going on since the mid-15th century. Farming has been around for as long as anybody can remember and as long as we've had historical sources to tell us about it. But the central thing about this is that up till 30 years ago, we had livestock being brought in here in the heart of the city. We had the most tangible part of food production visible where people live. Now today, when my 5-year-old nephew asks me where the milk comes from and I tell him it's in the cow, he thinks about it for a second and then he says, is there Coca-Cola in there too? Because now to him the cow has become a fridge because that's where the milk comes from. Now just a few decades ago, any housewife would be able to determine whether a fish was fresh, whether a piece of meat had met its expiration date. Today, we have to rely quite heavily on package dating. All this affects the way we view our food. At the same time, it's been romanticized and industrialized. The core of this challenge, as I see it, is actually communication. Are we capable of communicating what it is we do? I know that Welsh farmers are going through the exact same consolidation as we see in the rest of Europe. We see farming trying to maintain the same size, but on fewer hands. This means, in consumers' view, industrialization. We know it means bigger farms and often better farms. So we need to ask ourselves, are we up to the task of actually communicating what it is we do? Are we being as transparent as we need to be? Do we know who we are communicating to? At the end of the day, I guess the question is, are we harvesting hogs or are we killing the pigs? Now I'll be right here waiting to meet you live on February 4th, ready to answer any questions you may have. Till then, take care.